And we are recording.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for getting on and showing up at this Zoom meeting. It's always so nice to see you all in little boxes. Roll call shows that all counselors are present. And moving on to brief public health update. So that would be...
We could go to Geoff first.
Yeah.
Don't forget to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Counselor Geoff Low, Fire Chief of Town Orono. Just a quick update on where we are with the coronavirus. I'll give you just some numbers. I'm sure you've been watching them, but I'll give you what we have anyway. Right now, we're at a little over 1,000 cases statewide. That's confirmed cases, both hospitalized and recovered. Right now, there are 549 people that have recovered. The biggest bulk of increases we're seeing are in long-term living facilities such as nursing homes, residential cares, things like that. When we ran the numbers for our staff meeting on Thursday of last week, we were looking at right around 18 and a half or so cases a day. And that's been pretty consistent over the last couple weeks. So I don't know if that's the plateau for Maine or not, but those numbers seem to be holding relatively steady. So that's in my mind anyway, it's a good thing. I mean, the numbers are always going to go up as long as we have cases, but if we're at a plateau, then that gives us a benchmark to really work from. As far as Orono goes, we're not aware of any confirmed cases in the town of Orono. We have assisted a few people with some needs that they had concerning food, some social check-ins, and a couple other issues that have come up. We've also worked with economic development to support the farmers market and their efforts to get that up and running. We've established some rules. They had the first market that we were involved with on Saturday, and we'll continue to support them as we go through, as they look for a place to hold it. If they decide what they have isn't acceptable or whatever their needs are, we'll make sure that we're still supporting them through the process. I do not have any secret information about what the governor is going to do concerning when the stay-at-home ban is going to be lifted. If I had to guess, I would not think it will be lifted until probably the middle of next month. And just looking, doing some research online, it looks like she will come out with a decision probably tomorrow or the next day. Again, if I had to guess, I would expect to see it tomorrow. But I'm not looking for this to be lifted until the middle of next month. I hope I'm wrong, but I have been pretty close to correct most of the way through this. So other than that, resources seem to be holding out for us right now. We're starting to make plans to bring people back to work safety-wise. I'm going to be working with a library here a little bit to acquire some masks for them and go over some cleaning procedures, that type of stuff. And we've also supported Public Works, and I believe we'll be supporting the pollution control group with getting them back to work as well. So that's about all I have for you. If you have specific questions or whatever, I'll be more than happy to answer them. But that's about it for right now. We're pretty much status quo.
Geoff, I have a question. Are you aware, has anybody said anything about groups of college kids meeting? They're meeting in kind of groups in the woods and groups around. There is a pond over by Treats Falls that somebody has told me that they're kind of meeting over there. Does Orono know about that?
So I'm gonna interrupt here if
Yeah, where are you? Wait. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Got me? I have responded to a few people who've had who've called in with questions like this, and the answer is it's really hard to Monday morning quarterback this. So if they see groups of people meeting, they should give the police department a call to go out and just educate. That's what we're doing now. We're not trying to arrest people, but we're doing education. And I would argue, Cheryl, it's not all college students, just saying. But it would be helpful if they called when they saw it so the PD could go out and do education. Josh has increased patrols, just so you're aware. They might, the calls are down, but their activity has actually gone up in terms of their presence out in the community.
Okay. Yep.
I had a quick question, Chief. I know some librarians in other communities have raised concerns about not the giving out of books, but the receiving back of books, and sort of that not being the same as, curbside food or something because the materials are coming back, and is that a health concern? Can you talk a little bit more about what sort of procedures might be in place for the library should they start working again, or?
Sure. Yeah, I've been working with the librarian a fair amount as in terms of what you do when the materials come back and whatnot. The library presents a really a big challenge for us because the materials that they use, the paper bound books and those things, are really susceptible to degradation when you expose them to high levels of UV or chemicals or anything along those lines. So as far as using an external process or a chemical treatment or something like that, there's a big challenge with that. One of the good things about all of this is that the life of COVID on things like paper, cardboard, stuff like that we've found is very short-lived, and it tends to only be a couple hours. And some of the recommendations that are coming out now are saying to put the books into a holding place or an isolation place, if you will. So the books would come back, they would go to a secure room off to the side or something along those lines where they would sit for 24 hours. And then what the data is telling us is that the life of the COVID on the paper, it won't survive past the 24 hours. Now, that obviously has not been heavily field tested. There's no peer review on that. That's some testing that's been done out of a couple different laboratories. So right now it's what's considered best practice, and what some other libraries and archives are adopting is just leaving it to set and not messing with it, and then putting it back into circulation once they open up again. That's about the best we can do. The biggest concern is exposure to counter surfaces. So if a patron comes in, has been coughing into their hands, touches the counter while they're checking a book out, you can get some contact transfer that way. So deconning or decontaminating those areas is really important. And then the face shields up to make some separation between the customers and the library staff is also critical in case there's an accidental sneeze or cough or whatever the case may be. As far as, again, materials themselves, very low likelihood from what the information is telling us right now that there can be some type of exposure or contamination received from print materials that the library distributes.
So I just want to be clear that right now, library is closed to the public, so there's nobody going in, and we are not offering any material swap at all. So there isn't any kind of curbside service, and we're not accepting material back into the library at this point.
Yes, I know that there are rumblings in various communities about sort of should these stay-at-home orders be extended, or if they should be something that seasonally come and go. There's a push in a lot of communities for access to library materials, and the rationale is often given that it's because it's like curbside food service. But yes, just to make sure that we're not, because it's dangerous for the staff. So, and I know that once we are fully open, it's still going to be potentially something that staff and patrons might be concerned about, exchanging materials. We do have excellent electronic resources too. So.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I will just say that Lori and Louise are doing a fabulous job keeping up to date with what the state library is suggesting. And she just texted me, so I'm going to guess I've said something wrong. Carry on. I will.
Does the library have shields up yet? Or will they put shields up yet?
They're not up yet, but they will be. And Lori is in fact watching this because she wants to make sure everybody knows that they're taking guidance from the Maine State Library. And, oh, that I'm okay because I'm just clarifying. There we go. If there aren't any other questions for Geoff, I'd turn it over to Dave.
And I will be brief in this. I know you've got a lot to do today. So just as a kind of a highlight as the business situation and the, you know, in Orono and as well as in housing, we are consistently and constantly receiving questions from businesses for challenges that they are facing, whether it be for unemployment coverage, the PPP loan program, or just who is still exempt and you know who is essential and who isn't essential, and what the process is for becoming essential if your particular industry isn't, and then what guidelines are there. Many of the businesses who were initially labeled as non-essential have been converted to essential, but there's guidelines that go along with it. So as Meg was talking about, for comparing food with books, is everyone's different, and the guidelines tend to be, you know, to specific businesses or specific industries. The housing, the conversations I've had with housing folks again continue this week and to be the same as last week, and that is that looking at struggling with different programs and the processes for programs and how they're working for reimbursements for students and such. What I'm hearing from the landlords, we're still at about 50% of students, college students that are remaining in town. And I don't know if I've highlighted it before, but it's certainly just something to at least comment on, is that we think of students, college students here from UMaine, but you know, we also have a collection of college students that are attending, you know, Husson University, Eastern Maine Community College, Beale College, all living in, or many of them living in Orono. And so I've been dealing with different programs from different places. Sam has helped me connect with Husson. I thank you, Sam, for that. And we're trying to put all of those resources on our website at OronoConnects.com. So both for businesses as well as for individuals. We created a talk series that we started. Our first conversation was with a personal financial advisor, and so you're seeing those will start popping up on both Facebook feeds as well as our website. So again, hoping to be able to provide information to businesses and the citizens of Orono just on you know, some of the issues around the CARES Act. I'm prepared to try to answer any questions you might have.
No.
I have a question. Are you growing a beard?
I think Sophie put you up to that. I told her that this was my my stance for my employees who really want to be back in the office. So I said I'm not shaving until my people are able to come back to work.
Good deal.
All right, anybody else have any questions, comments?
Nope.
No? Does that conclude the public health update? Okay, we'll move on to number 3, the public safety and municipal building fire alarm panel replacement. Jeff or Sophie?
That's Jeff.
Oh, thank you. This has come before you tonight because we've had some frequent failures of the fire alarm system over at the public safety building. That system serves both the fire department and the police department downstairs. The system was installed when the building was built about 20 years ago, has never really received any upgrades as near as I can tell. And according to the vendor, Eastern Fire Equipment, is that the system has reached the end of its service life, essentially. The failures that we're seeing is the alarm system not communicating out when there's an issue, electrical faults which are causing the system to go into trouble, issues with the battery that's contained within the unit, the battery backup, and some other stuff. So basically, we're at a point where the panel needs to be replaced. Along with the replacement of the panel, the devices that it communicates with, such as the smoke detectors, the heat detectors, the manual pull stations in the station, the strobe light devices, and one duct detector, which would be above the stove upstairs, also need to be replaced so they can communicate with the new panel that's being put in. As far as running wire or any other devices, everything else is still serviceable. It's just these components that need to be replaced. And the cost for that is $5,996 that we received as a quote from Eastern. It's a required piece of equipment. It's required under fire code, both the life safety code and NFPA 1, the fire code, where we have people sleeping in the station. It is a public building. Both a sprinkler system and fire alarm system have to be in there. It is a communicable system now. Before it just ran into, the alarm rung into the office where Jessica is, which is the old dispatch office. Now it's set so that it actually rings into a private company, which will receive the alarm if we're out of the station for some reason and be able to communicate it back to us. So essentially, we're at a point where we need to replace the system really before we have a critical failure in it, and it goes out of service completely.
So in the background material, I did indicate that if it weren't for the fire crew and we could just have the buildings operating when, during the regular workday, we might get away with putting a fire watch on. However, given that people are sleeping, we can't do that. And it's not something that we would let a member of the community do in a similar situation. We would make them get the panel fixed. So as you're going to hear later, money is really tight. However, I think with some adjustments in some savings that we had in natural gas and electricity lines in the facilities, we could cover this $5,990. Jeff will have to come up with the $6.
Does
Sophie,
anybody have any?
are you looking for this to be moved forward to a regular council meeting?
Yeah, I didn't want a purchase like this to show up on a council
Right.
Meeting without having the opportunity for you guys to have the opportunity to ask questions or express points of view.
So my point of view is it doesn't seem like there's much choice. We really need to do it, and I would support moving it forward.
I just have a question. You said there was a price, and it sounded like that you were upgrading parts of it, and then later you said replacement.
So it's all replacement. What we're doing is we're replacing, the panel has to be replaced. That is a replacement. And the devices that communicate with the panel, like the smoke alarms, have to be replaced as well. So it is newer equipment, but it doesn't quite meet the threshold of upgrade, which would put us in a whole different category for cost anyway.
So when Jeff talked about being able to call out now, that is a change that we've made just in the last 2 years, because we had all these fancy alarm systems that would ring but didn't call anywhere, hence Keith Anderson House and others. So sometime within the last year and a half, we upgraded all of them to actually call to an alarm company, and we have contracts to manage those.
Okay, anybody else, questions or comments? I think you don't have a choice, so we'll, so please move it forward to council.
Yes.
And moving on to the Orono Business Micro Loan Guarantee Program. And before we start that, we did have a question about some conflicts of interest that might be on council, because several of us have small businesses in the area. I think for the purpose of just talking about the program itself, we probably, unless someone disagrees with me, we probably don't need to delve too much into the conflict of interest. I think when we get to a vote on putting the program in place, we may have to talk about some recusals. But at this point, I think we're still just in the policy phase. So, so I don't know if that's you, Dave, or Sophie starts. Dave starts.
I will start since she didn't jump right in. So as a kind of a get caught up to speed, we had spoken previously about the creation of a microloan guarantee program. This was a partnership we had with the University Credit Union, and we had started. I started working on this probably a year ago. And then quite frankly, the market didn't need it because the market was doing so well. So we kept kind of holding off on it. And then when the COVID-19 reared its ugly head, one of the things I was hearing from businesses was that even though that there are some may say many different funding opportunities on the state and federal level, the process of getting those funds were very burdensome and quite time consuming. I have folks who have submitted applications for funding from these 4 weeks ago and still haven't heard anything. So I began having newer conversations again with UCU as to how could we deal with create this program that's specifically COVID-19 related, and how could we create a microloan program that would give businesses access to funds on in a much quicker timetable, but they would be able to pay them back when either the federal programs, state programs came through, or through some other conventional meaning refinancing it through UCU. And so we received a proposal from University Credit Union that to start this program. We submitted it to the town's legal counsel for review, and quite frankly, I just got that back today to go over some of the recommendations. In your background information, you've got Sophie did a really great job of really capturing the overview of it. That it would be open to businesses in Orono that can demonstrate that they've been negatively impacted by the current public health emergency. That UCU would be, which was an important part for me, was that UCU would be responsible for underwriting, execution of the loan documents, and the administrating of the of the program. That the town would guarantee 80% of the loan principal and collection costs up to 100% of the outstanding portions of the loan for UCU. That helps them, quite frankly, is manage the risk. These maybe are loans that they wouldn't predominantly do because of the current situation, and that with this guarantee, it allows them to provide that loan to one of Orono's businesses, and at a rate that they're happy with. Again, this is a 0% loan. Loans, they do have a $250 application fee. That's in essence, that's offsetting the cost of that 0% loan. And it would, people can, can pay that right from the loan proceeds. There's a minimum repayment schedule that for the first 6 months, they don't have to pay anything. And then after the second 6 months is that they pay $200 a month, and then basically it's a balloon payment at the end of that, at the 1 year period. And what UCU is committed to doing is that they would either work out a conventional loan with that person at that point, or again, the intent of this is that this would get money in the business's hand quicker, and then they would just repay this loan back with proceeds that they get from either federal or state funds. And so, unless Sophie wants to add anything more to that brief overview, what we're really looking for is some thoughts of the council as to do you want to add any further eligibility requirements, or if the repayment schedule is designed to allow businesses to get to the fall when students return to school before payments are required, and a year to either repay or take out the balance of the traditional loan. It's just, if there are other standards that you felt were that we were being too strict on or not as strict enough on, and just basic some guidance and thought and the conversation about your thoughts on the program.
Cindy, I have a couple of questions. Are we thinking of a maximum amount? I know that the information said loans could be between $5,000 and $10,000, but is there a total amount that we're thinking the town would be willing to guarantee when you put the number of loans together?
So looking at what we have in the downtown transit-oriented TIF district, Tom, I think we would want to cap that at about 150,000.
Okay, so if everybody requested the maximum amount available, that would be 15 loans could be guaranteed.
Yes, sir.
The other question I have is the issue of due diligence on loans. I understand that some of the applicants would not be eligible for traditional loans in this particular environment, but is there an effort on the part of the credit union to say, this is a reasonable request, a credit-worthy applicant? I guess I'd stop there.
So in all of Dave's negotiation with UCU, the point that we brought to the table is that we wanted their underwriting service, which is why they're getting the additional $250 per loan. That we want someone to have been otherwise, had a solvent business. I have talked with one counselor who thinks that we should relax that a little bit, and perhaps they'll want to discuss that tonight. But the perspective that we brought into this was it's a revolving loan fund, meaning we really need to get the money back in order to be able to lend it again.
Right. I think the idea of the underwriting and having some sort of a feel for the credit worthiness of the applicant makes a lot of sense when we're dealing with basically public money.
And I will tell you, Tom, I think what the value we're getting from UCU is that they see us as a community partner. I don't think they're going to get rich on this by any means.
It doesn't look like it.
I have a couple of questions too. I have one that's I'm assuming that these small businesses may or may not have applied through the CARES Act. Is that, where's Dave? There he is. Is that true? Like they just haven't seen the money come in?
Correct. Is that some of them have, some of them may have applied for it and just, again, haven't heard anything back yet. And as again, this was something that we were we, meaning UCU and myself, were kind of struggling with is that if there are enough programs out there that are solving the problem already, why do we need to add another one? And what I heard back was that those things are just not as nimble as these programs are not always as nimble as that the businesses need. They need the help now. They don't need the help, 3 months from now.
Right. So my question is, if the money does come through, if they've sent an application in through the CARES Act and the money does come through and they're able to pay off that loan like immediately, would there be a way to waive that $250 fee, or is that the loan's been underwritten and that's what it's going to cost them to apply? I see you going like this.
Yeah, I'm actually writing it down.
Oh,
so,
no, I was looking over at Sophie. I know it's hard because I don't know where you guys all are, but so that was my first. That was one of the questions that I had, was if that $250 fee was refundable, like if they got their money like in 30 days, or I'm just making up an arbitrary timeline.
I think the question would be, Cheryl, if the council had the appetite to say if the loan was repaid within 30 days, we would just eat the fee.
Okay. My other question was, how would a business demonstrate, how would they demonstrate they've been negatively impacted? Like what would be a route they might go?
Well, the diving deeper into the weeds is that the loan requirement right now would be that they have to provide 2 years of tax returns for the business. If the tax returns have shown that they've been a consistently good business, they're paying their bills on time, their their balance sheet is sound, but yet you can see a dip in the first quarter of 2020. That in itself would show. I mean, there doesn't have to be a clear connection. I think it's basically a straight face test.
Okay, right. So letting go of employees and things like that to save money would be another.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
all good things. Right.
Thank you.
I actually had some stuff on this. I spent quite a bit of time going on this particular one, going back and forth, reading it, and I couldn't. I guess for me, what I would like to see kind of relaxed a little bit, and from your statement later on of what the credit union plans to do is, so I'm seeing like self-employed really are going to get, they're the ones who are hit by this. So I think it's got to be thought a little bit further in the sense that they've already lost a lot of money. They don't have anything, nothing's come in, because as we all know, when the first small business money came through, it went to the big corporations. Meanwhile, those people have probably taken most of their money. So when we look at the payment, nothing for the 6 months, 6 months, and then for another period to 12, you pay 200, and then you have a balloon payment. I've never liked balloon payments because I think it puts the person in a really bad position, especially as a small business. They may not have that money. I would like to see that maybe be pushed out further, because refinancing it through the credit union will then all of a sudden increase whatever that percentage is. Now it's not 200, it could be 250. So that would be my recommendation.
Mary, what is your timeline that you'd like to see?
I didn't hear you.
What kind of a timeline would you suggest?
I know maybe an additional 6 months. I just think they need to get their, if they have no money now, and they've been probably using their monies, whatever they have, and I mean, small business people like that, like a barber or something like that, probably don't have a lot of funds on hand. So I think if we can give them a little bit more time, maybe 6 months, to kind of like, instead of saying stop at this point, just give them a little bit more. I don't know if that's doable.
Good suggestion.
I know that the conversation with UCU, I don't want to speak for them, but I will say that what I heard from them was that they liked this time period simply because it, as Sophie said, this is definitely is not a moneymaker for them. And the longer that they are responsible for accepting the funds and working these loans, it costs more money for them to do. So they were comfortable with the year simply because that's the amount of time that they were willing to commit to, servicing the loan. If they've got to service it for a year after the 6-month grace, then again, I just think that for them, that's their cost. Their cost is going to go up to them associated with servicing the loan. But again, I think those are all, these are good points that we just need to, to work through. I'm not sure I am far off from what you're saying as well.
So I just wonder if we could do 9 months of grace and then 9 months of repayment, which gets you your extra 6 months, or have the ability to extend for cause, so that people who do make the bulk of their money from September to May can repay, and those who need more time would be able to ask for it.
I think another option, Sophie, might be to look at a 12-month grace.
Yep.
There's no guarantee that things are going to be back to anywhere near normal in 6 months.
The point I guess I want to just share is that the intent of this program was not to be the savior for those businesses, but to be the savior for it now. It's more of a short-term thing, with the intent that there will be other funding coming either from the state or the federal level that they could use to pay this back. It's just getting money into their hands quicker, not, again, fixing everything.
That makes sense.
And I think
the only thing that I had flagged about this one is, and I see what you're saying, Dave, about it being sort of just a stopgap measure, waiting for other things to happen. I guess the only thing, and the reason why I would also be interested just to hear more about if those, these good suggestions about timelines could be shifted at all, is just because who knows what the face of university attendance is going to be. I mean, even if the university is open regularly, are the numbers going to be there? Are people going? I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen with that population that drives most of the economy in the town. And the second thing is, not to denigrate the state or federal government, but there's a lot of uncertainty about whether people will get their money or whether their application will just tailspin. I mean, our business was lucky. We got in our PPP stuff right away, and we had help with that, and we're able to pay our employees, thankfully, through this. But there's a lot of businesses that they just don't know. They're just in limbo. And the administration, especially at the federal level of these funds, has not been great for a lot of business owners. So I guess that would be the uncertainty for a local business, thinking, okay, well, I've got to do this now because I have to make it, and I hope things will work out so that I can repay it on this schedule. And then things don't work out that way for them. I would be worried about that.
I think
great point.
I think the hard part to counterbalance is it is supposed to be a revolving loan. So we want to help as many businesses as we can. And so being out 2 years, that's a long time. That a business could go under in between time. And then I had a question, if you could explain to me the reference to what Representative Tipping is doing for us, because it makes it sound like it's too late for whatever he's trying to do.
Yeah, no,
No, he helped. He helped us.
Very much so. Okay, thank you. What happened, as I explained earlier, I had spoken with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner from DECD under the previous administration when we first started talking about a loan guarantee program, and they were on board with it, and they thought it was a great idea and a very unique way of doing things. when we started, when we heard, when the COVID-19 thing started and I tried to reenact where we had left off, there was a new person involved with that's overseeing the TIF programs. And her opinion is that a loan guarantee program was not the same as a loan program. And therefore we couldn't use TIF funds in order to fund this loan guarantee program. It took me a couple of weeks to work that through. And at Sophie's suggestion, Representative Tippings was made aware of it. And let me just say that probably within 24 to 48 hours, their position was completely changed. And he, as the chair of the taxation committee, had said that he would be working to clarify the language in the future legislation that would say that a loan guarantee is the same as a loan. But I was able to successfully argue that point with the Attorney General's office, and they finally signed off on the fact that a loan guarantee program could be identified as a loan program. So I think that what he is proposing to do is just take any question out of it in the future, but it's not impacting this day of DECD has given us to go ahead to use these funds in this method. Does that answer your question, Cindy?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thanks.
And Dave, how soon do you want to get started with this?
As soon as you folks feel comfortable.
So this one would take a formal council action. So if you're comfortable in general terms with it, we can continue to work the documents behind the scenes, but with the plan to bring it forward to you at your May meeting.
Makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Dave, was there any legal review that substantially changed the documents you presented to us?
No, I saw everything as minor orange and tangerine thing. Some people call it an orange, some people call it a tangerine. So I didn't think there was there was nothing in there that was what I call fatal.
Okay.
Roger, just
Go ahead. I was the one who commented about the language of saying whether it was a viable business. And Sophie responded that, that the goal is to do underwriting to make sure that it would be a business that could pay back. So the underwriting, since a lot of our businesses are maybe sole proprietors, that rather than calling it a viable business, I like the wording of having the UCU involved to do the underwriting, because you would be able to see what that person's record was in repayment. Because there could be businesses that were launched so recently that you wouldn't have a record of how well they were doing before this. And we wouldn't want to disenfranchise them. The people who are going to survive this we want to help as many businesses as possible survive this. And post-pandemic, or as we come out of pandemic, it will use different skill sets than people have. So even if someone was doing well before, this might make a disequilibrium for them. And then people who are just starting out, they might find a way to succeed, especially if we're able to give them this revolving loan. So I was the one that expressed concern about the vocabulary of whether it was a viable business before we lend them money.
If I could just add to that, Lori, is that my conversations with many folks in the banking community is that anyone that feels that they even remotely might qualify for SBA funding has been applying for the money. And in the SBA program, there's an emergency action fund where folks can borrow up to $2 million for your business for these, and there's a forgiveness component to it. And so everybody is applying for it, whether and they're under their standards for their application says that there can be no underwriting requirements, meaning you can't underwrite the program. And so the bankers are saying we're sending these applications in, and there's probably a 25% chance that this business will ever be able to repay this loan. We didn't want to go in that direction, and that was the conversation that I had with with UCU is we want to be able to help businesses in this particular program. We want to help businesses that are sound, who are just having a tough time because no fault of their own, that COVID-19 has disrupted their business, and this is just a way to help to keep them their nose above the waves until this ends.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? Does everybody feel comfortable moving this to the council meeting in May?
I do.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, if I may just a second, I don't normally do this, but I wanted just to say that, because you'll never hear it otherwise, is that Sophie has been a tremendous amount of help throughout this whole process, and there really hasn't been any parts of this program that she hasn't touched. So I want to thank her for her help this going through as well.
Great. So she wasn't at the beach all day, you're saying?
Allegedly.
Dave, you're muted, so we missed that last comment you made about Sophie at the beach.
So she may have been, but whatever it was, it was doing well.
Okay, so Sophie, you got that to go to May. All right. I think we're on number 5, approach to capital infrastructure investment planning and projects.
We are.
Our wonderful Public Works Director has worked with me behind the scenes on this, and I'm going to do my best to fill in, but he has been called away and has something he needs to be working on that's not on Zoom right now. When Rob and I approach putting budgets together, especially the capital budget, we do it based on what we think, this is the way the town expects work to be done. And when we think about capital infrastructure, it's been about trying to fix our crumbling infrastructure the right way. So when we go into a road, we try to fix it so that it's not breaking up in 3 to 5 years. And it's expensive, but it has been that's the way we were both taught to address infrastructure. Given the fact that Orono is not unique in the lack of resources, or the finite resources, as Tom would say, we've been watching what other communities are doing and the state. And in some places, they are deciding to keep people happy and address more of the facade of the problem. So a really good example, I put it in the background, is College Heights, because it's a project that is currently in design. If Rob did a simple shim and overlay, that would cost about $60,000. That $60,000 would probably last 3 years, maybe 5, depending. The issue is that it does not address the fact that the storm drain system in that particular neighborhood is way undersized and falling apart. So it actually bubbles up on the street and you get big, huge puddles because it's so overwhelmed. When we started the design work, I think the original, that's been on the capital plan since I've been here. So it's been here for 9 years that we've just been kind of pushing it out because we've had to stretch the capital plan. And I want to say it was on the plan for $250,000 about. That is now turning into almost a $500,000 project. It's a $400,000 project to fix it correctly. So when we look at the capital plan that we're putting together for the budget, a couple of things have happened. And the first is we have stretched so far that when Rob brings me the budget, most of the time in the past, I've been able to help, we've tried to stretch it some more. And we just were not able to do that. And that alone, it equates to almost a $200,000 increase on the general fund taxes for capital road infrastructure in the FY21 budget. So before we publish the budget, Rob and I really wanted to get some feedback from council of, we think it's the right thing to do. We think it's the way we've been taught. We think it's good stewardship, but does council still support that? And what is the approach that council would like us to be taking when we put this budget together, finalize it?
So Cindy, you ready for a comment?
Yes, I am.
I've thought a lot about this item since we got this background material, and I'm really torn on it, Sophie. Philosophically, I agree with the approach that you have outlined of do the job, do it completely and do it right. But boy, I think this is a unique year. And I'm very concerned about where we're going to be with revenue sharing. I know our investment income is going to be lower than it was last year. And I can't imagine that this is a year that we're going to be able to support much, if any, kind of a real estate tax increase. So I'm not giving anybody much direction other than sharing real concern that philosophically you're on target, but I think we've got to keep in mind the balancing of that with the financial reality of this unique year.
So if it's just this unique year, Tom, but we can otherwise get behind maybe more slowly working ourselves through the plan, are you looking for essentially a Band-Aid year and keep things together and then try to add moving forward? Or
well, I would not be looking to abandon the philosophical approach forever of doing the job well and doing it right. But I am thinking that this might be the year that big projects are going to have to get band-aided more than we would like to do them. We don't know what's going to happen to revenue sharing. We don't know. I assume, is this the year that we're going to get the first payment requirement on the school bonds? I mean, that's going to be a huge pill to swallow. So I guess that's where I am. Not big forever, but maybe Band-Aid for a year.
I think, I don't even know if we can put a definite time on it. I agree with Tom on everything, as I usually do.
Oh.
Well trained by that, Tom, very well trained. But who knows what this is going to be in 1 year. I think maybe Band-Aid it for a year and then reassess again. I don't think we can make hey, let's give it a year and then see what happens. That's my take. I think things might be just a little different somehow on the other side of this.
so
I'm concerned too. I think that, I don't know if what the university is going to do, as far as coming back in September. Is it possible to have options? I know this is a lot of work, but is it possible to go, this is what it might look like, here's our Band-Aid, but if we can squeeze more money out, then we might be able to look at this way, like the long term, like the big picture philosophy as opposed to the Band-Aid philosophy. Is it possible to have two sets of numbers?
Well, Cheryl, we can have as many sets of numbers as you want.
Right.
I think, so I will tell you, part of the challenge is that we've been underfunding infrastructure improvements for a decade or more. And so, and that's not saying people are doing something bad. It's just when we haven't had money, that's kind of, we push a project. And so my fear is that once we start Band-Aiding it, if it's more than just, we don't know what's happening on the face of the earth and therefore we want to just pause for a year, then my sense is that we're probably never going to get it back. And that makes me concerned because as municipal officials, we are supposed to be stewards of the town's infrastructure. And I think it's easier to say we're not going to do a project than it is to look at the level of service that we are providing in the community. And it's really hard to sit and, I'm just going to say it once and I won't say it again through the entire budget process, I promise. But it's really hard to sit here having scraped and scrimped on budgets where the community decided it wanted to add something new for the school and feel like now it's my job to cut our budget so that there isn't a tax increase. So I'm sharing that just once. You will not hear it out of my mouth again.
Sophie, I was thinking more along the lines of, if we didn't do this project, would we be ruining the stormwater system, or would WPCF have more issues later on? So if there's a project that's independent of other structures, then maybe we could just Band-Aid it. But College Heights, for an example, I think is overrunning the stormwater system, which is then affecting WPCF. So
it's overwhelming the stormwater system, which is undermining the road further. That's why that whole bottom section is totally disintegrating, because the water's coming in through in between the base of the road and the asphalt. But in terms of WPCF, the only thing that changing the stormwater system would do, Cindy, is allow people to connect who are now on sewer. So we might reduce the flow, but that's kind of, I don't see this being a time that people are gonna race to spend money to connect their foundation drain or their sump pump to the storm drain system.
Yeah, no, well, and I was just thinking of evaluating projects based on whether it's just because the road is disintegrated, maybe we could Band-Aid it. But if the implication of redoing the road affects other things so that we're out of compliance with our stormwater permit or that kind of things, then I think we have to do a bigger project. And maybe College Heights, maybe Park Street or whatever. But.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. I also think that it would make sense to also look at, well, Essex Street would be a really good example. Essex Street isn't all that bad right now. However, if it goes for too long and the overlay wears off, then you're going to end up having to rebuild the base. And that takes a $200,000 project that we were just finishing dumping almost $1 million into when I got here. So I think we also want to protect the assets that aren't crumbling yet so that they don't crumble. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense today.
Oh, you are.
Terry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it actually gave me a little bit of time to really kind of think before I threw my words out there, because I'm kind of in that same camp of like letting things kind of go and go. And as also a citizen that probably the most important thing for me is infrastructure. I don't have kids in school. I don't have like a lot of the things that a lot of people really rely on in this community. That to me is kind of important also. And it does concern me that it's the only item that tends to get pushed aside over and over. Having said that, if whatever we do, maybe this is a great opportunity, because we should probably looking at as a 10-year plan, things that need to get redone, probably really fine tuning something like I said, that this area gets done, that these roads as we progress each year. And, but I don't want to see something continually get kicked down the road. And if this year's kind of like a little bit like, yeah, we're not really sure, and then saying, well, let's wait and see just in case, and then maybe next year. If I lost my job today, am I gonna let my house dilapidate? No, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get my house in order. So I just think that we shouldn't continually keep not taking care of our stuff.
In general, Well, okay, so to pick up where Sophie left off, this is the time of year where I start hollering about monies from other places, and this will not be the only time you will hear me talk about it, I'm sure. In general, my view is, and I've always been quite loud about this, is that we need to be able to do we operate on a very, very tight budget. We are extremely fiscally responsible as a community and do a whole heck of a lot with not a lot of resources, and take the abuse for the tax rate when a lot of the reason for the tax rate is entirely out of our control and we are at the mercy of other higher powers. And I have always said that as much as I have no desire to raise anyone's tax rate, if folks are angry about tax rate increases, then they need to turn their attention elsewhere as to where those increases are actually coming from, because they really aren't coming from the municipal government. We are running a tight ship here and making wise decisions. And we cannot let our roads crumble and fall apart and lose a lot of money that we've invested in the infrastructure in this community simply because we don't want to raise taxes. And under normal circumstances, I would say push forward with this philosophy. I am slightly concerned that there'll be an inability for people to pay their taxes as a result of what's currently happening right now. So, I mean, I think that what's important, I mean, Cindy's bringing up important points that I think we certainly need a triage. And if there are things that absolutely have to be done the right way and they need to be done now, we have to figure out how to do that so that we don't lose money on investments, as you've pointed out, Sophie, and so that we're not harming other systems in the town. Maybe we do need to figure out all the things that we can Band-Aid for right now, just recognizing that people might really struggle in this next year to be able to pay their taxes. However, I don't want to, no offense to Sam, I understand where you're coming from with the wait and see. I don't want to say, well, let's keep it loose. Like, I really would like us to return to a more aggressive approach to updating our infrastructure as quickly as we think it's reasonable to expect for the community. And if that presents an issue in terms of what the tax rate's going to be, we have to keep on message about where those increases are actually coming from.
Point taken. I don't necessarily mean forever not have it locked down, but I'm just saying, like, you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows what this is going to be like in a year. We're hoping this thing blows over. We're hoping UMaine opens this fall. We hope those students come back and start spending their money. We're hoping all over the place. So I'm just saying, while we're just hoping, you can't really build anything substantially on that. We need to be open to the possibility of it. So I hear you. I think we need to lock this thing in as best we can, but we also need to deal with the firm reality is we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And so I think we will have to, at some point, reassess it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'm responding to what Sophie said about worrying that we could, if we back off, we might continue staying backed off. And not because we're doing anything wrong as counselors, but just, if you back away and the public sees you back away to a certain extent, that becomes normal. And I think what Sophie, I hope I'm not mischaracterizing what you said, Sophie, but it sounds like, the more we kick things down the road in general, not just now, that leads to an expectation of what the status quo is and what the norm is. And we don't want to go too far backwards because we've already kind of gone backwards too much.
Can I say?
Go
Go ahead, Sophie. No, I was just going to say, it sounds like we've entered the pre-budget presentation and discussion agenda item. But even on the agenda item, it says that towns and cities have been advised to plan for a wide range of possibilities. So because we don't know, because the future's uncertain.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna see, because I'd like to separate the two discussions, but the direction that I have is that Rob and I need to look at this plan a little bit differently, and it's not just the normal stress that we feel like we're under every budget year, but to make it very clear that this is kind of an emergency approach. And if things are not going to bounce back, then I think the next step would be for council to start in the fall and really start evaluating what the priorities would be for the FY22 budget.
It
Like
may
in the
it may
fall.
mean it may mean doing one project right and not doing the other project, or it may mean doing two projects as
So,
Band-Aids.
yeah, so we've got some commitments already, like the $300,000 culvert that we had raised some money for. We have to raise the rest of it because that project's going to be done at the beginning of FY22. So we want to break that up and do it over 2 years. So let me have my expert, who's pretty good at his job, help me kind of walk through this and maybe have kind of the priorities. When you talk about a 10-year plan, I hope you know Rob's got all the documents for like a 25-year lookout for infrastructure. So that's something that we can absolutely do for you. But what I'm hearing is a commitment to try to do it right normally, but keep everything together for this year. I'm
Yes.
seeing Tom, right? Yeah, okay, good.
Yep. Want to move on to WPCF?
So today is Joe's Sunday, and he doesn't get great internet out in St. Albans. So I said that I would try to fill in for him, which is kind of comical. As long as you don't ask me about the bugs, we should be okay. So it's not often that I come to you and say, here's a grant opportunity, but I don't think we should take it. But that is exactly what I'm saying. We were actually contacted by Wright Pierce, who is the engineering firm that we've been working with at the university on their sanitary sewer evaluation study. And they offered to write the grant for an opportunity to get funding to see how climate change is impacting our wastewater infrastructure and come up with a plan or priorities for how to address those impacts. That was something we could totally get behind because we're seeing issues with CSO activity that we would pin right back to climate change. It's costly. We, when they scored the grants, we did not score high enough to get any of the climate change money, but they offered us this financial sustainability grant. When I dug into what that is, it's really cool. The engineers come in, develop a very technical computerized asset management system for you that you have to be able to use from this point forward. When I asked Joe where that would be on the list of his priorities, he said it would be pretty low. He's like, it's not green ledger paper, but it's not super high tech, but he has an asset management plan. You can go to any piece of equipment. We've got it inventoried. We know when it was put in, we know what has been done to repair it, and we have a generally known life expectancy. Like our capital infrastructure, we don't have enough resource to fully fund an asset management plan where we would be putting money away every year. So when that piece of whatever broke, we'd just be able to reach in and pay for it. So, but the problem with this grant, they estimate that the project would put about $100,000 between engineering, consulting fees, and the computer and the software system. It would cost about $100,000. 50% of it is grant, and 50% of it is a low interest loan. So you take the full $100,000 as a low interest loan. When the project is done, 50% of it gets forgiven. It's not a bad program. I used it in with my former community. When we look at grant funds, I've always been an advocate for funding the things that would otherwise be a priority and not simply add-ons. Joe and I felt very strongly, though, that it was not a staff decision to not accept grant funds that were offered to the town. And we wanted to at least have a conversation with council about that before we allowed the deadline to go by.
Anyone have any comments?
I agree. I agree, Sophie, that we have other priorities at the moment.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree.
Yeah, I think it's not a worthwhile use of our funds at this point. Anyone else?
I think it's a wonderful thing that they applied. And I assume the reason they missed the mark is because there's other communities that are in much more precarious situations with climate change than we are, especially since the dam removals. Our river isn't as threatening as it might have been. So, but I think it's great to do assessments and have people who are sharp, and that's their job, is to figure out how to do better. So I'm sad to say that, yes, with our finances, it's maybe not the right year, but it seems like it would have been a good opportunity, and maybe we can think about applying again in the future and enabling us to have that input, especially since half of the costs get covered by the grant.
All right, she's set. All right, I guess we'll move on to the pre-budget presentation and discussion.
So most of the time when we have a pre-budget discussion, I quickly go over revenues, quickly go over expenses. I tell you where I think we are at the end of the day. Everybody says, that's too much. I say, I know, I'll go back. I'll try to cut some out. I smooth the budget for another couple of weeks and make sure that all my links were correct and it is accurate. And then voila, you have a budget that most of the time you don't have major issue with. This budget discussion is gonna be a little bit different. And what I thought we would do is kind of talk in general terms about the town's position and look at the current budget as well, and then kind of talk for a few minutes about next year's budget. On the expense side, we're actually weathering this pandemic better than I thought we would. Fire department is hemorrhaging overtime. We have somebody that's on long-term medical leave, and so we are filling every shift at this point that somebody has to book out. And we've had some illnesses, we've had some family emergencies. It looks like if we're able to maintain this, the way we're responding right now, that we should just about break even in the fire department, which would be wonderful at this point. They are under incredible stress. So when I look at forecasting the expenses moving forward, taking all of the known or expected payroll through the end of the fiscal year, it looks like we will have about $1.5 million left for discretionary expenditures. Now, when I say discretionary expenditures, I do not mean just things that we want. What I mean are things that we are not obligated to pay, like payroll, benefits, the county tax, the school tax, debt. And so we'll still have to keep the town running with, operating and all those same costs. We're not seeing massive decreases in use, but it looks like we did a good job estimating a budget, and we're probably going to come in on the expense side at just a little bit better than break even at this point. We still have $63 63 days, something like that, 64 days. So the expenses don't look horrible. The revenues are where we are having some issues, so as you would expect. So the town on the general fund side was projecting to collect about $19.1 million of revenue this year. 13 million of that is taxes. Those taxes have been committed and we are on track to collect them. I'm not seeing a major deviation from our normal collection at this point. In fact, we took in a little over $40,000 just today, which was, I mean, that's a good sign. When I look at our revenues, by and large, we are set up with lots of different small revenues. The ones that stand out are revenue sharing, excise tax, and ambulance receivables. So for revenue sharing, we thought we would bring, when we put the budget together, we thought we were going to bring in $1.5 million. As of yesterday, we still had $336,000 outstanding. When I look at the 4-year average for collections, it would tell me, and I also looked at, I'm sorry, let me get to the right page. I also looked at where we were in terms of the increase. We were running significantly higher than last year, as we would expect, because we got a bump in revenue sharing. But I was expecting that we would have ended the year at about a $2,000 loss in that line. So it's more money a month than we were bringing in, but not quite enough to make the 1.5 million. So I have no idea what is going to happen with revenue sharing. When you look and you pay attention to the fact that revenue sharing is made up of individual state income tax, individual corporate state income tax, franchise tax on financial institutions, and part of the service provider tax and sales and use tax. So when the economy comes to a screeching halt, you would expect that the bottom is just going to fall out. We have received word from the state that the comptroller is going to distribute income tax used. The comptroller plans to use recognized budgeted revenue from April 15th property tax payments that have been extended into July. So the reduction that we will see in revenue sharing payments are primarily going to be based on underperformance of sales and use tax, if that's making any sense. So it's not, the bottom is not going to completely fall out of revenue sharing because of the way they plan to administer the program. It will shrink. That pool is going to shrink. And unfortunately, the Revenue Forecasting Committee that is the one that gives us all the guidance hasn't come back yet. They are planning to meet before August. By statute, they normally meet in March and in August. The governor earlier today announced that she's calling them back sooner rather than later. So I think that one is going to be hard to judge. When I looked at the 4-year average and then trying to account for the increase that had been planned, I see an estimate that we could potentially lose between $150,000 and $275,000, be short on revenue sharing. 150 to 275. I think licenses are, without the business activity and without the permitting for spring construction, I think that we have a risk of coming in about $16,000 under there. The charges for service, which would include our ambulance and other rec programs, it is probably, I'm hopeful, but I am not sure that we'll be able to start summer day camp in this fiscal year. So I am suggesting that we might be as much as $125,000 underspent in charges for service. We had good news with our earnings for a while, interest earnings. In our general fund, we were actually ahead of where we expected to be. We have about $11,000 left to collect. My sense is that we'll be able to collect that 11,000, but when you look in the audit, we right now are in our invested funds are almost $100,000 down in the reserves and WPCF funds that cemetery funds that we have invested. So when you look at the audit, it will look like we take a hit there because they have to capture, even though it's on paper right now, they have to capture that loss. So the big one is excise tax. I looked at the last 4 years of excise. We were actually on target in March, the beginning of March, to over collect excise, which is a wonderful thing. We were on pace to collect about $25,000 more than what we had budgeted. That all came to a screeching halt. We saw a 39% drop in March, just the March average compared to the actual received. And I am projecting about a 70% drop for April. When we look at that, if we stayed with a 70% drop through April, May, and June, we would end up about $141,000 under there, which is about 18.17%. So timing of the return to normal operations is really important with this one because we know people are buying cars. We see it. We know that we still have people who need to register their cars. However, under the current executive order, those registrations are valid for up to 30 days after the end of this public health emergency. So if the public health emergency ends before the end of May and the 30 days starts ticking away, we will get people in to register their vehicles. June is a historically high month for excise receipts. So it is entirely possible, if timing works, that we might not undercollect excise. However, the council chair asked me to give where I thought we were going to be. And so when I add all of this up, I think we are going to be between $250,000 and $560,000 under collected by the time this pandemic is done. So I will tell you,
We just
that-
don't know what to say to that, Sophie. So,
well, I gotta tell you that it is, we are in a big unknown. We truly are. You know, if the feds stick with the line that municipalities and states are pigs at the financial trough, and we just want money to you know, keep being able to spend it and take care of past due bills, then we're going to be on the higher end of that, I think. If they are able to respond in a way like what the comptroller is doing, which I think is wise, if the state decides they might use a little bit of their rainy day fund, if, you know, there are all these ifs that in an election year, I would hope that people are going to want to try to keep people happy. And so I have a hard time getting wrapped up in the sky is falling, because what I keep hearing, National Leagues of Cities, ICMA, MMA, is we do not know. This isn't as clear cut as even the Great Recession. I think that's so funny, the Great Recession. Was where you saw what the impetus was, you saw the crash down, we hit the bottom, we knew we were going to go to the bottom, and then we could plan our way out of it. But back in 2007, it when that housing bubble kind of burst, I think we're not stretched so much within our budget to need to collect every dollar, to not have expense lines in the expense budget that we're probably not going to get expended. Just in the decade that I've been here, we've cut quite a bit out of the expense and projected more. So I have done what I've been trying really hard to give you guys good information, and what ICMA told me to do was, well, not me personally, but in the webinar that I participated in, we pulled all of the data. I actually added a little bit onto the normal work that I would do. We went back to 2005, looked at our revenues to be able to predict the ones that were more elastic, meaning would be more susceptible to the swings in the economy, versus the ones that were not as elastic. On the one hand, we have lots of different types of revenue. They tend to be smaller pots of money, which I think will do well for us. Even when the economy was down, we saw you still saw some consistent revenue numbers, collections with fee for service and licensing and permitting. And so I don't know that that's going to act differently. We didn't see a major shift on tax collection. The numbers stayed well above, you know, that 97, 98%, which is a good tax collection number. So I think that we are doing, you know, I can't pick outside of excise tax and revenue sharing and the ability to collect property tax, other areas that we need to be like focused on. I think those are the three. They just happen to be our three biggest revenue sources.
Sophie, is there a chance, or is there a sliver of a chance that people will lose their jobs in the next year?
Where?
Here in Orono.
For like,
as far as like budget, you know, when we start thinking about budget, are we, I mean, is that a possibility?
so I'm going to tell you exactly what I told the senior staffers when I met with them, which is I don't think I have extra people here. I don't think that, given the service level that council is asking us to provide, we feel really stretched anyway. I can't point to something and say that that can go, you know, that person can go. I also think that we have a really dedicated staff, and the last thing I would want to do is get rumor or concern out there unless it was going to become something we were going to work on. So I think it would be really, it has always been important to me to keep the positions that are important to doing the work. And you've seen, I've shuffled things around at times. But I would never say never, like, no, it's never even a sliver of a possibility, because town council every year decides what they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund. I would say that any cut to personnel would have to have a corresponding pretty major restructuring, I think, in how we provide service, the level of service that we provide. So I don't think it's an easy thing. There are places out there, you've seen like Westbrook and some others that have had, geez, we've laid off 20 people. Well, most of them are seasonal and Parks and Rec, where there is a program that's been shut down that they're not able to run, therefore they don't have the income in from. We don't have that. And each person that we've brought on, I've had to explain to council why they're important, and you've, in very tight budget times, have had to agree with me, or else they wouldn't be here. So I guess my answer is it's not something that I am making plans for right now. I think that once you start down that path, it's really hard to unring that bell. And I would rather take a pause and see if we can get something out of the forecasting committee, see if we, if the end is in sight, then once we know when the end of the shutdown is, we should be able to then better extrapolate what the impacts moving forward would be. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I certainly hope not, and it's not my intention.
I was thinking about, the big picture versus the Band-Aid. And then if we have to Band-Aid to save a job, I would rather do something like that, as far when we were talking about infrastructure before.
Well, and I think the other piece that's important to know, Cheryl, is that if we lay somebody off, that is a direct cost to the town. That person doesn't go to the unemployment rolls for the state. That I get the bill for that until the person is off unemployment. In a situation like this, we are seeing unemployment claims from people who left on their own accord months ago, year ago. It's 5 quarters that we're on the hook. And because we're a governmental agency, we have seen our levy get as much as doubled because that's what they can do. So I think we just have to understand that there is a pretty big cost in keeping someone and also in letting someone go. Oh, Tom, I think you're still muted.
Hear me now?
I can.
All right. We're talking about personnel. One of the other things we hear in state and in some municipalities is hiring freezes, that if by chance we have a vacancy in a position, given this economic time, that we're going to hold off on hiring people. Is there any thought to that?
Well, I wanted to talk with you because we do have a position that we had come to council to talk about that was important to a transition plan. We've got a rec coordinator position. We've identified the person that is a finalist. Everything is on hold right now. That particular position, when I think longer term and about the recovery, I think community development is, I need community development and Parks and Rec to be firing on all cylinders for that. And so my argument or my hope is that we could still go ahead and hire that position. But I wanted, and that's part of the reason why Dave and Mitch are both on the line. Mitch was on the line. Did we? Oh, there you are. Okay. I think that normally I'm not sure I would actually go the next step to bring on a full-time person. But in this particular case, I think that it's important, and we've been able to mitigate a lot of the impact of that individual by shifting Mitch, significant amount of Mitch's time into the TIF district. So that was my kind of argument moving forward, but I would welcome council's input. Or not.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a tough one. And I guess if some of the summer programs aren't going to happen, or if we're not able to do things in groups, then I don't know if Parks and Rec will actually exist for that period of time. That might be something we consider delaying.
We continue to work with the university around summer camp. We're exploring both on-campus and off-campus opportunities, not so much for the camp aspect, but as childcare, because we've got a lot of people in the community and on campus that rely on that opportunity for having childcare for their kids during the summer. So I hear what you're saying. I don't know that oh, go ahead. Dave or Mitch, do you have something you want to add?
I would just say that through this whole thing, one of the things that I'm recognizing is maybe not the immediate things that are happening today, because of course there are restrictions that are clearly restricting what we can and can't do. The question for me and the things that we've been trying to plan for is, what does the new world look like, and how does the model have to change as we move forward? And the amount of work that actually takes to go from doing things one way to completely changing them to do them a different way to serve the community. Now, when we talk about that, I think that is up for discussion about what things are important to our community and what things we can not do. But I think when I start to look forward at even summer camp, the pool, things like that, is how do you operate with unknowns, first of all, but then the second step is if there's a phased approach in and we're trying to come back to some normalcy, are there ways that we can meet the needs of the community while bringing that back under those restrictions? And all that is a lot of back office work and planning and kind of stepping up to things. And even so far as to look at the fall and say, when the fall shows up, does fall youth sports look the same? Or do we have to create a new model in order to be able to help kids participate as we move into this? And what's the appetite for that? So I think all those things are a challenge to look at because they all create a lot of behind the scenes work to make them happen completely different. And to be fair, there really isn't a model out there to kind of follow either. It's not like every community is in the same boat, and every community is dealing with these things differently. You know, so that's kind of the challenge. And I would, you know, I think Dave could speak to this as well, but also looking at the business community coming out of this on the other side is the amount of work to start the economy back up is going to be heavy. And so trying to manage that and having that the bandwidth and the resources to do that, you know, are kind of what we're thinking about.
So I would just offer a couple of thoughts. And the first is that I really envision Dave, number one, dropping back to a 5-day work week as opposed to where he is right now. And him taking on the role using his expertise as a business consultant. That's what he's been doing a lot of. And if that happens, Mitch really has to step in more aggressively into the community development deputy role because there's an awful lot of other work that needs to happen there. The second thing is just, for example, when we talk about doing things differently, we're talking about how we're going to do our concerts on the green. Well, they're not going to be concerts on the green, my guess. So we've been talking about streaming concerts, artists' work, working with Stillwater Community Arts to get things going. That takes a lot of work because we have to go beyond our resources and probably reach out to, for example, the university or somebody else for some technical help. The Artsapalooza, is there any way that we can help support still maintaining an Artsapalooza, even if it's in the virtual world? Things like that. That's where our thinking has been. And our thinking is that we hope to have, while it probably won't be called Rad Camp, something like that, where whether it be off campus or on campus, and that takes an awful lot of running around to make that happen. So that's why normally I would be like, no, like we put all the ads out for lifeguards. We've selected the people, I think, that we're in the process of selecting them, but we're not going to hire them until we know we're going to open the pool. That makes sense to me. This particular position is one that's so key. If we're going to keep a Parks and Rec presence and actually begin to fill out this framework that we've been building, that the community has said that they want, I think this would be a key hire to make.
I would like to just chime in that Mitch and Sophie are faster on the unmute button than I am. So I'm just going to say ditto to everything that they just said, and then only add that I've heard a couple of people have said here, and I've been hearing it on social media nonstop, is that we don't know, what the university is going to do this fall. I have posted on our Facebook page a copy of a presentation that the university presidents did this past week, and I was very happy with the message that they were sending. Was very clearly that the university is prepared to be open this fall. They are working towards making that happen. They have getting all of the pieces in place, and their intention is to be open this fall. The only thing that would change that is if some social norm prohibited it, then they're going to have to look at alternative ways of providing their education. So, and what I heard both Mitch and Sophie say is that we're used to providing services. I say we. Mitch is used to providing services off the top of his head. I mean, he's been doing it for so long that he knows what needs to be done on a regular basis. He can put a soccer program together with his eyes closed. But because we're having to do this in a completely different world now, it's taking a huge amount of time to figure out how do you provide these services and provide the social distancing or other requirements that you have to have. But I can't imagine a world without outdoor activities and other recreational activities being in Orono. So you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, it's not going to happen, and it takes us a huge amount of time to try to do that. Sophie eloquently put it. We've been just this week alone. We were dealing with Artsapalooza, the music concerts. How are we going to do those differently? And so it's taking us a lot more time to deal with things that 6 months ago or a year ago we could do it just automatically because we've done it so many times. Now we've got to figure out new ways to do it, and it's very labor intensive. There's my 2 cents.
I also read that the university was going to open in September, but our world is virus driven right now, and I hope they do because my son is going there next year, and I can't wait to do a drive-by and throw him out to his dorm. But it's so hard to know. It's just so hard to know. It's September. They're also talking about the re-virusing after everything's said and done. So yeah, it's hard to plan.
The good news is Cindy doesn't know it yet, but it looks like Cindy, Dave Milan, Geoff Low, and I have a meeting with the president and her key staff to talk about the town-gown relationship and moving it forward. So my letter, that email that we worked on, seems to have gotten some traction, which is good.
Oh, good.
So the thing I don't ever want to have happen is for me to go out and hire somebody only to have council be like, you shouldn't have done that. That's bad. So if people don't agree with my thinking, I'd really want to hear about it now before I brought somebody on board.
I'm actually okay with this person because my mind went to, yeah, the world's gonna be totally different. But you actually went through a whole process to find what you felt, which, so if I have to say that you're always very good, or in the team, about finding that right fit. We speak of this all the time. Who is the right fit for our community? So you obviously found that right fit, and to have to say you lose that person, you have to go back and then go through the whole process again. I'm not sure I'd want to do that.
Sophie, I think we've heard a good argument for continuing on the path of hiring the person.
I will tell you that any vacancies that I get from this point forward, if it's possible to just hold it until we get through this process, I'd rather shuffle people than lay people off. Absolutely.
I agree.
I guess
Not
my
that
only
I'm
question,
looking to
Sophie, is
lay
how
anybody
are
off.
we making up that 250 to 560 shortfall? And are we just adding to it? I mean, is there a federal bailout coming, or?
So I haven't heard anything about a federal bailout, and I think well, I'm not going to have a political discussion, but I haven't heard anything about a federal bailout. I will tell you that I am going to try, now that I've identified, we got through the month of being down, and I was able to be able to extrapolate, I think, some decent numbers there. I will go back with my team and try to hold expenses. So we would be, I can't do anything about collecting more money, but I can try to save as much as we can on the expense side to shrink the net difference. The way it works, Cindy, is if we net out to a negative number at the end of the year, meaning we expend more than we bring in, it hits the undesignated fund.
Yeah.
And so my effort right now is going to be aimed at trying to mitigate how we hit that undesignated fund.
Okay. Yeah, because my concern is that we're going to start budgeting in the hole. The next year in the hole.
So I think I would be concerned. I want to make sure that we do the things that we need to do this year, because then you really do start out in a hole when you're in July working on July's money, doing things that you had already needed to do in May. So my goal is to really get people to think about what are the things that absolutely have to happen, what are some things that we could hold, or maybe if it's a new program, maybe we don't offer that new program. So that I'm kind of look at. I'd like to try to position our limited resources to give the community the best opportunity to bounce back, meaning if we need to have childcare off campus here, is there a way that we can use, for example, a different tax increment financing district to help offset some of that cost and be able to get people back to work? So it's kind of the thought, but yeah, we're going to try to balance as much as we can on the expense side.
I think our biggest revenue source, of course, is besides taxes, is revenue sharing, and I'm still optimistic that this year we're going to end up with pretty much the revenue sharing we planned on. The state is going to come up with some more money. I'm pretty confident. I think it's next year's revenue sharing that we may be in trouble on.
So the forecast, the treasurer, the revenue sharings, state revenue services, what they're suggesting is they're thinking in the first quarter we're going to see a pretty substantial dip.
Yeah.
What that dip looks like, we don't know. And I think in the next 45 days or so, Tom, we should be hearing more just as we get towards the end of that fiscal year.
Right.
So the reason that Mike Noble is here is because I wanted him just to make sure that all of town council was in the know about how our property values are going to be impacted by this. Can you give us just a quick primer on that, Mike?
Sure. First off, I don't expect, cut right to the chase, a major impact to property values. I have seen sales slowing. I mean, people are not out looking for houses at this point. Information requests are down with regard to appraisals and so on and so forth. But for this year that was set on April 1st, I don't see any significant changes that aren't already known. We've got some adjustments for the homestead that's increasing, as well as a couple other known adjustments. But as I've listened to these conversations and been thinking, if for some reason the university doesn't open in the fall, that could present for next year some significant issues with regard to student housing income. I mean, not to be the sky is falling guy, but for this year, I think we're fine. I don't anticipate any issues, but in the back of your mind, student housing values will be significantly impacted if the university doesn't open. And because obviously some of our largest taxpayers are student housing facilities, just something to keep in mind. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the university opens and there's no impact. But again, nothing for this coming year, but looking forward, there may be some potential.
The other issue that Mike and I are working through right now with RSU 26 is the need for potentially for us to delay our tax commitment. They are trying to get a workaround to be able to roll in a higher budget than last year. Right now, what the executive order says is you don't have to have a budget validation as long as you just roll in the same number as was approved the previous year. The school can't do that. They have an additional $900,000 debt payment that will be due this coming year. I have talked with the superintendent. The net budget increase is less than that at this point, still significant, but less than that. But they can't just roll in last year into the FY21. So Mike cannot commit taxes without a school assessment. And so what we might end up seeing is if we have to have a budget validation that requires an election that can't be held until July 14th, as an example, we might see that get stretched even more under current state law. So we have been having good conversations with the school, but just to make you aware that our fund balance is really important for us to be able to function at times like that, where we might not get tax bills out at the time that we normally do. So if I was going to take anything away from this discussion, it is that you are asking me to come back with maybe not the budget that doesn't increase, but if the budget does, how we get to 0 increase on the town side. That was a question mark at the end.
Yeah, Sophie, I was also even thinking that perhaps we could be looking at, again, what's mandated that we really can't change. And then, so I know that there's health insurance will probably go up. Workers' comp will probably go up. So those things we can't really change. We can't change some of the trucks that we've already, said we were going to buy. So those things can't change. So kind of build, in my mind, build the budget that way where there's things that we can't change and then things that we can talk about, yes.
So I would just say that you've signed a collective bargaining agreement with MAP that resulted in about a $25,000 increase, less than what I actually initially projected because of staff turnover. And we have the final vote coming up on the IAFF contract that is going to add next year about $150,000 to the budget. We knew that, but that, just so you're aware, I wish it was super cut and dry, and I will endeavor to try to make it easily comprehended and easy to go through it, but the time, I think it's going to be, I think if the goal is no change or to absorb the school budget, you're going to be looking at some pretty big shifts in the way we provide services.
I don't think we want to absorb the school. I think that's in my personal opinion, that was voted in by the voters last year. We don't have much to say about that. And I think that, if we've already voted on the union contracts, we can't change those. So we may your budget may come in higher than last year's just because of what we're already obligated to do. Gotcha. And I guess that's what I'm saying, okay, is that,
I understand now. Thank you.
Sophie, is there any places that we're saving money because of this? Like, is there any places that, like, we just, I don't know, police department or, calls or just, I know the fire department's out and about.
So, well, the police department, we're still staffing.
Right.
We're not having to fill quite as much overtime because our academy person is back with still 6 weeks to go, but he's back. The fire department, the calls are actually down in the fire department. They're more, the fire calls are up a little bit, but that's what's impacting the ambulance billables. We just don't have them. But we are still doing the general operation that we have been doing. I'm still paying people, and when you consider our budget that we go out to taxpayers for is about $7 million. Well, sorry, let me take that back. It's about 5 million. And about almost 5 of that. So we have a net budget of just shy of $5 million, 4.7 million. About 9 million in expenses, and 5.6 of that 9 is salaries and benefits. So what is driving the costs right now are the people, as it normally does, and they're working. I don't have people that aren't.
But are we seeing any savings in, like, so we're not heating buildings maybe,
Yeah,
or we're not, there's no lights on, there's no.
So that is how I'm able to say that I think we can find a little bit in the expense budget to mitigate the loss of revenue. But we have some savings in natural gas. We have some in electricity. And we are we have some day-to-day expenses that aren't there, but then we have expenses related to getting everybody up to work remotely that took, like IT as an example. So yeah, unfortunately we don't have massive savings. I think one of the things we're going to have to talk about is how we want to approach the pool. And in order to really have that conversation, that is a conversation that I think we want to wait and just see where we are in the next couple of weeks.
Thank
I
you.
think we need to do some, Cheryl, because you don't want to not take care of your asset to the point that we cause damage, but we might decide not to open the pool.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to continue working on the budget. I wanted to also chat, I think I probably, given the changes that I think I'm going to need to make in it, probably going to need 2 weeks, and then we'll have something for you. I am quite certain that even if the shelter in place order changes, the likelihood that we'll have public meetings in the near future is probably slim. I'd like to do budget workshops on Zoom. Part of the reason we got this webinar feature is when I have docs, I'll actually be able to put it on the screen for you, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. We'll be able to get everybody budget notebooks and follow along. So my hope was that we'd be able to just do the budget workshop season on Zoom, probably in smaller chunks of time. So just one department at a time. Try to keep it to about an hour and a half, as opposed to the big long marathon ones that we sometimes do. Does that sound reasonable? Probably do 2 a week?
Yep.
Okay.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, okay, good
Yep.
deal. Anybody have issues if I have budget binders just delivered to their doorstep? I'll put them in a plastic bag or something so that you can, all right, sounds good. I can manage that.
Okay,
Thank you, guys. I appreciate all of your support.
great. In the interest of time, Councillor Robertson has said that maybe we could take item 8 up at a different time. Is that, so maybe we could push it to the next workshop?
Yeah, it's not a priority, and I'm getting hungry, and I'm sure everybody else is getting tired of sitting. So it's okay, but I would ask the council just think about it. I know there's a lot of municipalities that are starting energy committees and different kinds of committees to think about climate change, and we're kind of headed in that direction statewide anyway. But let's talk about it at a different time.
Cheryl, there was a link to Belfast on that.
Yeah.
Probably be good if all of us had a chance to take a look at that before we take it up again.
Yeah, it's a good link. And thank you, Sophie, for writing it up. And Sophie and I have had a conversation already, and Cindy, so she knows we know what's going on. So, but anyway, thank you for taking that off. And we'll figure it out later.
So that puts Sophie back on with the revised work plan.
But I don't know that this is a one and done conversation. I think it's me just putting some things on your plate to think about, and when we come back, maybe we could talk at greater length. I was asked, what we could maybe continue working on, or what I thought for the rest of the year. I think the budget workshops are going to take a lot of time. I don't think they're going to be quick. You did a great job, Sophie. We love it. On to the next thing. So that's front and center what I think is most important. We also have received a general inquiry about putting in a commercial solar project. So it was like a solar farm on like 20 acres of land. I don't have any specific information about it, but when we received that inquiry, it caused us to go to the ordinances, and what we've discovered is that we've been dealing with solar effectively for residential by simply putting it through the electric permitting process or the building permitting process. There is nothing in that process that deals with site plan, the impacts to neighbors, the stormwater, the things that a development like that could in fact cause. So we reached out to Roger just for a quick question about whether or not we could even do a moratorium at this point in time. And if council is interested in moving forward with a moratorium on commercial solar projects, to give us 90 to 100, I think 180 is the maximum number that we could get, but I think staff was thinking we could probably get it done in 90 days. Then a discussion here today allows us to reach back to today, or even prior to that, but cleanly to today, so that we wouldn't have any grandfathered applications sitting on a desk. So are folks all right with doing that to give us an opportunity to get some ordinance language in place to regulate solar farms?
I am, Sophie. I just sat through a presentation this morning, and state statutes that are making this something that people are going to want to do. So I think we should have some definite specifications around it before we open it up.
Sounds good.
So that sounds like I should move forward and put that on an agenda?
Yes, please.
All right. I think it would make sense for us to spend some time the next time we meet and over the course of the next 8 weeks talking about financial oversight and planning, kind of where are things coming down as the world changes around us, how are we positioned to deal with that. If we get to a point where we can have more public conversation, I'd really like to get back to looking at all types of rental activity so that we look at it in one place, because we're doing things that work for one group that are completely inconsistent for another group. And how do we want how do we want to regulate rental activity, period, which would then give us the framework to do a whole bunch of work that the comp plan wants us to do. We have a deadline of June 13th, July 13th for the EnvisionNet TIF renewal, and that's a renewal that we really need to have happen because that's how we're going to pay to pave Godfrey Drive so it doesn't hit the taxpayers. And we're going to move the TIF loan project forward, and then we've got some business licensing that needs to happen as well. So that's what I had, trying to make it a workable bite, and then anything else that I have that pops up as things do from time to time.
Good.
Works for me.
Me too.
Okay. Terry, that work?
Got it.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. That's all I had.
Okay. Your council chair doesn't have anything to report. I've been sitting here most days looking out the window, so it's pretty brief.
Your council chair is amazing and has kept me sane. So hats off to her.
Thank you.
That's her report.
Okay. Manager report, anything more?
Well, I told you about the loss of investment, of our loss of value in our investment portfolio. We are looking at a side letter right now with the unions because we've got public safety personnel who we are not allowing to take vacation right now. And they're going to cap out. So we're trying to figure out the most cost-effective and fair way to deal with that for both labor unions. So we're working on that. We still plan to hold free landfill, no ticket landfill days. And the curbside brush cleanup, we think that's really important that we still do that as scheduled because the storm really wreaked havoc for a lot of people. Rob has taken on the challenge of having both of his crews working starting May 5th. They're both halves of the department are going to be in the department at the same time. He's doing that through some staggered shifts. So they'll essentially start a half an hour early. One group will end the day a half an hour before the other group does, and they'll stagger their lunch as well. Joe Madigan plans to bring his crew back. We plan on, I think starting this week, to begin flushing our sewers. Really important to do, and we can't let that wait. And Tom Perry will be so excited to know that we have begun the striping if he hasn't been out in his truck lately.
I have indeed.
So we were very excited to get that done. So you will continue to see messaging. We're also working with John Jemison and Diane Smitherson. Diane.
Smitherman, Sophie.
Smitherman, there we go.
Sorry, I fumbled my mute.
That's all right. To get the community garden and see what used to be the CVIS garden up and going. We're working with them around how they can meet the social distancing requirements. And the university has an absolute hiring freeze on. I have asked them to let me know if they do end up needing products to feed their garden, because that is a huge food source for many people in our community. So that is my that's my update.
Can I add one thing too? That in lieu of a long conversation on environmental committees, OEDC has been meeting online, and they just wanted me to do kind of a shout out just to let council know at workshop that that they're working on the Taylor Bait Farm, looking for grants, and also that that they will seek the town of Orono to agree to take over road maintenance and plowing through a memorandum of understanding this winter or coming up, if everything goes according to plan. So this is not anything council has to do right now, but just to put it on the just a head start, I guess, that trying to get that that recreation center up and running is something that's still ongoing. So I just wanted to make a quick announcement.
Belle, did you have anything? Did I miss anything that you wanted to talk about?
The only thing to mention is that the street and stream cleanup has been delayed, but not canceled. So we are still running the poster competition. Submissions are due at the end of May, and we're hoping to hold the cleanup possibly in June, but it'll all depend on how things go.
Belle, how are kids going to get posters to the town office this year?
So we have had kids drop them off in the drop box, mail them, take a picture while they're holding them and email that to me.
Okay.
Scan them and email that to me. And I think that's what we've had. Submissions are way down right now, so we'd love to see some more.
I'm
asking kids to still put the date of May 18th on there to be consistent. And we'll update it once we know a
I'm
date.
still working with my kids, so I can put that out there too. All this information is on the Orono website?
Yep.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything else to add before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Thank you, Sam. All right. Have a good evening, guys.
Night.
Bye. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Stay safe, everybody.